Officer Jordan Wright was wrapping up his evening patrol on a busy city street where the hum of traffic and the chatter of pedestrians created a steady urban rhythm. Known for his professionalism and strong connection to the community, Jordan took pride in his role as a protector of public safety. But this ordinary evening would soon take a dramatic turn. Out of nowhere, the roar of an engine pierced the ambient noise. A bright red Ferrari came into view, weaving recklessly through the lanes and ignoring traffic signals. Its engine growled as it accelerated, overtaking cars and narrowly avoiding collisions. Jordan's instincts kicked in. He flipped on his patrol car's siren and lights, signaling the driver to pull over. The Ferrari didn't slow. Instead, the driver seemed emboldened, accelerating even further as if to challenge the officer. Jordan maintained a safe distance while pursuing the vehicle, skillfully navigating through traffic to avoid putting others in harm's way. Finally, at a congested intersection, the Ferrari was forced to stop. Its sleek frame stood out against the sea of more modest cars, drawing stares from bystanders. Jordan parked his patrol car, stepped out, and approached the Ferrari with caution. The driver's window was tinted dark, masking the person inside. Tapping on the glass, Jordan waited. Slowly, the window rolled down, revealing a man in his 40s, dressed in a tailored suit and sporting an expensive watch. His demeanor was impatient and annoyed, as if the stop was an unwelcome inconvenience. "What's the issue, officer?" the man said, his tone dismissive. He didn't bother making eye contact, instead checking his phone as though the interaction wasn't worth his time. "Sir, you are driving dangerously, speeding and ignoring traffic signals," Jordan said calmly. "I need to see your license and registration." The man smirked, finally glancing up. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice dripping with entitlement. Without waiting for a response, he pulled out a glossy black business card instead of his license. William Cross, it read, followed by a list of credentials that included CEO and investor. Jordan didn't flinch. "Mr. Cross," he said, handing back the card, "your title doesn't exempt you from following the law. Please provide your license and registration." Cross sighed dramatically and leaned back in his seat. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, rummaging through his glove compartment. When he finally handed over the documents, his irritation was palpable. Jordan took the documents back to his patrol car to run them through the system. As he did, Cross grew more restless, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. By the time Jordan returned, Cross's patience had worn thin. "Look, officer," Cross began, his tone sharper now. "I have an important meeting. Just write the ticket and let me go." "Mr. Cross," Jordan replied, maintaining his calm, "this isn't just about a ticket. Your driving endangered others, and I need to ensure this is addressed properly." Cross's face darkened. "Do you really want to do this?" he asked. "People like me don't get hassled over minor infractions. I'll make sure this is dealt with higher up." Before Jordan could respond, Cross made his move. Slamming the car into reverse, he sped backward, clipping Jordan with the side mirror. The force knocked Jordan to the ground, his flashlight and radio scattering across the pavement. Pain shot through Jordan's arm and shoulder as he hit the ground. But years of training kept him focused. He quickly assessed his injuries, bruises but nothing broken, and pulled himself back up. The Ferrari, however, didn't get far. Traffic at the intersection had boxed it in, and Cross had no escape route. Jordan dusted himself off and radioed for backup. Within minutes, additional patrol cars arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the scene. Officers surrounded the Ferrari, their voices firm as they ordered Cross to step out of the vehicle. Cross emerged reluctantly, his expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. "This is absurd," he said, holding up his hands. "I didn't do anything wrong." Jordan met his eyes. "Sir, you just hit an officer with your vehicle and attempted to flee. You're under arrest." As handcuffs clicked around Cross's wrists, he sneered. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "People like me don't get arrested." But for the first time that night, it was clear that Cross wasn't in control of the situation anymore. The scene at the intersection was chaotic. Flashing lights illuminated the rows of stalled cars as curious onlookers gathered, some recording the events on their phones. Officer Jordan Wright stood by, steadying himself after the impact, as his colleagues worked to secure the scene. The driver of the Ferrari, William Cross, was visibly irritated, his expression a mixture of indignation and disbelief. This is going to be a nightmare for you, Cross muttered as the officers placed him in the back of a patrol car. I'll make sure your department hears about this. Jordan ignored the comment. He focused instead on ensuring that all evidence was collected properly. The damage to his uniform and the bruises on his arm would later serve as physical proof of what had occurred. But for now, he concentrated on gathering eyewitness accounts. Several bystanders stepped forward, eager to share what they had seen. One witness, a delivery driver parked nearby, spoke with enthusiasm. That guy was driving like a maniac. I saw him nearly hit another car before he got here. Then he just reversed into you like he didn't care. Another witness, a pedestrian who had been crossing the street moments before, added, he was going way too fast. It's a miracle no one else got hurt. As their statements were taken, Jordan felt a surge of gratitude for their willingness to come forward. He knew how important it was to build a solid case, especially given Cross's apparent confidence that his wealth and influence would shield him from accountability. The following morning, news of the incident began to spread. Local media picked up the story, framing it as a dramatic encounter between a high-profile businessman and law enforcement. Some headlines hinted at a misunderstanding, while others focused on Cross's reckless behavior. The latter angle gained traction as dashcam footage from Jordan's patrol car was released, showing Cross's erratic driving and the moment he reversed into the officer. Cross's legal team wasted no time launching a counteroffensive. They issued a statement claiming that the arrest was an overreaction and that Cross had been misunderstood in a stressful situation. His lawyers painted him as a hardworking entrepreneur who had been unfairly targeted, emphasizing his philanthropic contributions to the community. Behind closed doors, Jordan faced mounting pressure. Some within his department expressed concerns about the optics of the situation. You know who this guy is, right? One colleague said during a briefing. He's got connections everywhere. We need to tread carefully. Jordan, however, refused to waver. This isn't about who he is, he replied firmly. It's about what he did. He endangered lives and assaulted an officer. That can't just be ignored. As the case gained momentum, it sparked a wave of public reactions. Some voices, particularly those sympathetic to Cross's reputation as a successful businessman, argued that the situation was being blown out of proportion. Why ruin a man's career over a minor traffic incident? One prominent commentator asked during a televised debate. However, many others rallied around Jordan. Local community groups organized rallies, demanding accountability and equal treatment under the law. They praised Jordan for his professionalism and called for a thorough investigation into Cross's actions. At one rally, a speaker addressed the crowd passionately. It doesn't matter how much money or power someone has. No one is above the law. Officer Wright stood his ground to protect all of us, and we need to stand with him now. The support meant a lot to Jordan, but he also felt the weight of the scrutiny. Every step of the legal process was being watched closely, and he knew that any misstep could jeopardize the case. Still, he remained focused on the facts, confident that the evidence would speak for itself. As the date for the preliminary hearing approached, Cross's legal team tried every tactic to discredit the case. They questioned the severity of Jordan's injuries, suggesting that the officer had exaggerated the incident. They also argued that Cross had panicked under pressure and had not intended to harm anyone. But the evidence against Cross was mounting. The dashcam footage showed not only the reckless driving, but also the deliberate reverse maneuver that knocked Jordan to the ground. Witness testimonies corroborated the video, painting a clear picture of Cross's disregard for safety and authority. When Cross was asked during an initial interview why he had not stopped when signaled, his response further undermined his case. I didn't think it was necessary, he said. I was running late and I assumed it wasn't a big deal. That statement became a pivotal moment in the case. It demonstrated not only a lack of remorse, but also a sense of entitlement that resonated poorly with both the public and the legal system. As the legal battle intensified, it became clear that this was not just about one reckless act. It was a test of accountability. For Jordan, it was a reminder of why he had taken the oath to serve and protect, no matter the obstacles. For Cross, it was the beginning of a harsh lesson that actions, no matter who you are, have consequences. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, community members, and supporters from both sides filled the benches, eager to see how the high-profile case would unfold. At the center of it all sat William Cross, his demeanor polished and calm, as though he were at a business meeting rather than a trial. His legal team had spared no expense, bringing in top-tier lawyers who specialized in high-profile defense cases. On the other side of the room, Officer Jordan Wright sat with quiet resolve. His uniform was crisp, his posture steady, reflecting the professionalism he had maintained throughout the ordeal. This was not just a trial for him. It was a statement that actions, no matter the status of the individual, carried consequences. The prosecution opened with a clear and compelling narrative, presenting a timeline of events supported by evidence. Dashcam footage from Jordan's patrol car was played for the court, showing Cross's reckless driving, the near-miss collisions, and, most damningly, the moment he reversed into Jordan. The video left no room for ambiguity. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the footage concluded, showing Jordan being knocked to the ground and Cross's subsequent attempt to flee. The prosecution emphasized the deliberate nature of Cross's actions, arguing that his behavior demonstrated a blatant disregard for the safety of others. Witnesses were called to the stand. A delivery driver testified about seeing the Ferrari's erratic movements before the incident. He didn't care about anyone else on the road, the driver said. It was like he thought the rules didn't apply to him. A pedestrian who had narrowly avoided being hit added, "I was crossing the street, and he sped right past me. I froze. I thought he was going to hit me." Jordan also took the stand. Calm and measured, he recounted the events of that night, his words reinforcing the evidence presented. "My priority was ensuring the safety of everyone on the road," he said. When Mr. Cross refused to stop, it became clear that his actions were putting lives at risk. Cross's defense team attempted to shift the narrative. They argued that Cross had been under significant stress due to work commitments and had panicked when he saw the patrol car's lights. They claimed his actions, while unfortunate, were not malicious, but rather the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. They also questioned the severity of Jordan's injuries, suggesting that the impact had been minor and that the officer's reaction had been exaggerated. Cross's lead attorney framed the situation as a misunderstanding, insisting that Cross had no intention of harming anyone and that the incident had been blown out of proportion due to his public profile. However, Cross's own testimony under cross-examination weakened his defense. When asked why he had accelerated instead of stopping, he replied, "I thought I could get away with just paying a fine later." The courtroom fell silent at his admission, the weight of his words sinking in. Outside the courthouse, the public response to the trial was polarized. Some supporters of Cross argued that the case was being used to target a successful businessman, while others viewed the trial as a much-needed stand for accountability. Community groups organized demonstrations, holding signs that read, "No one is above the law and justice for all." Jordan received an outpouring of support from community members who saw him as a symbol of integrity. Neighbors and colleagues expressed their admiration for his calm and professional handling of the situation, despite the challenges he faced. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Cross was found guilty on multiple counts, including reckless endangerment, assault on a law enforcement officer, and attempting to flee the scene of a crime. The judge, in her closing remarks, emphasized the importance of accountability. "Mr. Cross," she said, her tone firm but measured, "your actions demonstrated a clear disregard for the safety of others and the rule of law. This court must send a message that no individual, regardless of their wealth or status, is exempt from the consequences of their actions." Cross was sentenced to community service, a substantial fine, and a 1-year probation period. The verdict was a clear statement that justice would be applied equally, regardless of privilege. As the trial concluded, Jordan walked out of the courthouse to applause from supporters. For him, this was not about personal victory, but about upholding the values of fairness and responsibility. Meanwhile, Cross began his sentence, starting his community service at a local youth center. Initially resistant, He gradually came to realize the impact of his actions and began to reflect on the privileges he had taken for granted. The case became a defining moment for the city, sparking broader conversations about accountability and justice. For Jordan, it was a reminder of why he had chosen to wear the badge, to protect and serve, no matter the challenges. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury prepared to deliver its verdict. After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and emotional arguments, both sides of the case had presented everything they could. The evidence against William Cross was overwhelming, but his legal team had worked tirelessly to reframe the narrative, portraying him as a misunderstood businessman caught in a moment of panic. Officer Jordan Wright, seated at the front of the room, remained composed. The bruises from the incident had long healed, but the weight of the trial had left its mark. He had faced intense scrutiny, not only from the media, but also from parts of the community. Despite this, his resolve never wavered. This was about more than one incident. It was about the principle of justice. The foreperson of the jury stood, the courtroom falling silent as the verdict was read, on the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty. On the charge of assaulting a law enforcement officer, guilty. On the charge of attempting to flee the scene of a crime, guilty. A collective exhale swept through the room. Cross, seated beside his legal team, remained stoic, though a flicker of disbelief crossed his face. For the first time, it seemed to dawn on him that his influence and resources wouldn't shield him from accountability. The judge, a seasoned jurist with a reputation for fairness, addressed the court. Her words carried a weight that resonated with everyone present. "Mr. Cross," she began, "your actions on the night in question displayed a reckless disregard for the safety of others. You placed lives at risk, showed no respect for the authority of law enforcement, and attempted to evade responsibility for your actions. This court must send a clear message. No one is above the law." The sentence was firm but measured. Cross was ordered to pay a substantial fine, complete 500 hours of community service, and serve 1 year of probation. Additionally, his license was suspended for 6 months, ensuring he wouldn't be behind the wheel of another vehicle anytime soon. The verdict sparked immediate reactions from the community and the media. Outside the courthouse, supporters of Officer Wright gathered, holding signs that read, "Accountability matters," and "Justice for all." News outlets covered the case extensively, with many focusing on the symbolic nature of the ruling. One commentator noted, "This trial wasn't just about a single traffic incident. It was about the principle that everyone, regardless of their status, must be held accountable for their actions." However, not everyone agreed with the outcome. Some of Cross's supporters claimed the punishment was excessive, framing him as a victim of a harsh legal system. His legal team hinted at the possibility of an appeal, though it was clear that the verdict had shaken Cross's confidence. For Jordan, the verdict was a bittersweet victory. While he was relieved to see justice served, the experience had been emotionally exhausting. The trial had put his character under a microscope, with every action he took scrutinized by the public and the press. Yet, as he left the courthouse that day, he was greeted by a wave of applause from community members. People approached him to shake his hand, thanking him for his service and for standing firm in the face of adversity. One elderly man, a retired teacher, said to him, "What you did wasn't just for you. It was for all of us. Thank you for proving that the law still means something." Jordan nodded humbly, his sense of duty reaffirmed. He knew this case would be remembered for years, not just for its outcome, but for the conversations it sparked about fairness and accountability. Cross, on the other hand, left the courtroom with far less fanfare. Flanked by his lawyers, he refused to speak to reporters, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet frustration. For a man accustomed to controlling the narrative, the trial had been a humbling experience. In the days following the verdict, Cross began his court-mandated community service at a local youth center. The work was far from glamorous, organizing supplies, cleaning facilities, and mentoring at-risk teens. But it was a start. While he initially approached the tasks with reluctance, he couldn't ignore the impact of the people he interacted with. One teenager, a sharp-witted girl named Alana, asked him bluntly, "Why'd you think you could just do whatever you wanted? Didn't you know someone could have been hurt?" The question lingered in Cross's mind long after their conversation ended. It was a perspective he had rarely considered, that his actions, no matter how minor they seemed to him, could have lasting consequences for others. As the community service progressed, subtle changes began to show in Cross's demeanor. He started listening more during his interactions with the youth, offering advice that felt less rehearsed and more genuine. While he didn't openly admit it, the experience was reshaping the way he viewed his responsibilities, not just as a citizen, but as a person. For Jordan, the months after the trial brought a renewed sense of purpose. He returned to his patrol duties, his connection to the community stronger than ever. The case had reminded him why he wore the badge, not for authority, but to uphold the principles of fairness and safety for everyone. The trial of William Cross became more than just a legal proceeding. It became a turning point for the city, a moment that highlighted the importance of accountability and the enduring value of justice applied equally to all. In the months following the trial, the ripple effects of the case were felt throughout the community. The conviction of William Cross became more than just a headline. It symbolized a shift in attitudes about accountability and the principles of justice. The courtroom decision resonated deeply with many residents. Local organizations began hosting forums and discussions about the importance of fairness and the need to hold everyone, regardless of their status, to the same standards. These events brought together people from all walks of life, sparking conversations about responsibility, privilege, and the role of law enforcement in maintaining balance within society. Jordan Wright found himself at the center of these discussions. Invitations poured in from schools, churches, and community groups, asking him to share his experiences. Though initially hesitant, Jordan realized the importance of using his platform to inspire and educate others. At one community forum, he addressed a packed room. Justice isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about ensuring that those laws apply equally to everyone. This case was a reminder that integrity matters, not just for law enforcement, but for every one of us. His words were met with a standing ovation. Many in the audience saw him not only as a law enforcer, but as a moral example, someone who had stood firm despite the immense pressures of a high-profile case. Meanwhile, William Cross began fulfilling his court-mandated community service. Assigned to a local youth center, he initially approached the work with reluctance. Tasks like organizing supplies, mentoring at-risk teenagers, and participating in volunteer programs felt beneath someone of his stature. Yet, as the weeks passed, something shifted. Interacting with the young people at the center, many of whom came from challenging backgrounds, gave Cross a perspective he had never considered. One teenager, a 16-year-old named Malik, asked him bluntly during a mentoring session, "Why'd you think it was okay to drive like that? You could have hurt someone. What makes you so different?" The question hit harder than any courtroom testimony. For the first time, Cross found himself genuinely reflecting on his actions and the sense of entitlement that had driven them. Slowly, his conversations with the teenagers turned from superficial to meaningful. He began sharing his own mistakes and the lessons he was learning, using his experience to encourage the kids to think carefully about their choices. By the end of his service, Cross had become a familiar and surprisingly respected figure at the youth center. Though he never fully shed his air of confidence, there was a noticeable humility in the way he carried himself. For Jordan, watching the community grow stronger in the wake of the trial was a source of quiet pride. However, he remained focused on his work. Returning to his patrol duties, he noticed a shift in how people interacted with him. Residents stopped him on the street to thank him for his dedication, and younger officers often sought his advice, viewing him as a mentor. One evening, Jordan received an unexpected call. It was Cross. "I wanted to say, I was wrong," Cross began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I've had time to think, and I see now how my actions could have hurt people. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed to tell you that I'm trying to do better." Jordan paused, processing the sincerity in Cross's tone. "Acknowledging your mistakes is a good start," he replied. "What matters is what you do with it moving forward." Though the conversation was brief, it left an impression on both men. For Cross, it was a step toward personal accountability. For Jordan, it was a reminder of the power of perseverance and the importance of standing firm, even in the face of adversity. The case left a lasting legacy in the city. Policies were reviewed, ensuring stricter penalties for reckless driving and stronger enforcement measures to prevent similar incidents. The youth center where Cross had served saw an increase in funding and community support, thanks in part to the attention the case had drawn. For Jordan, the experience reinforced his belief in the importance of integrity and fairness. It wasn't just about upholding the law, it was about setting an example for the community he served. He continued his work with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that his actions had sparked meaningful change. In the end, the case of William Cross and Officer Jordan Wright became more than just a story of a crime and its consequences. It became a symbol of growth, accountability, and the enduring impact of standing up for what is right.